Okay, thanks. I'm Ed Halloran. For those that don't know me, I've been with RKL since 2010 and working with X3 since 2011. Before that, I implemented Mass 500, and I started doing that in 1999. And before that, I worked in the tax department at Ernst & Young. So we're going to go through some year-end planning tasks for X3. And so this is our agenda for today. We're going to go through all the general ledger postings, like a checklist of all the things that you need to have done before you actually close out or can close the period and then close the year. So we'll go through a couple of managerial reports. We'll look at actually closing the last fiscal period and then closing the year. It's two separate processes. We'll talk about running the financial data extraction reports, or most people have the SEI reports. We'll go through some other considerations that you might consider doing at year end. We'll generate 1099s, or we'll talk about generating 1099s and then reporting them to the IRS. Talk about some default parameters that you'll probably want to update in the system once 2018 rolls around, and we'll also have a question and answer period at the end. So the first part of the checklist is the posting of all the operational transactions. I've tried to get as many in here as I could. So you want to make sure that all your shipments have been invoiced. So everything that's been shipped in 2017, you want to make sure you generate an invoice for it in 2017. You want to make sure all your sales invoices and credit memos and BP customer invoices are all generated and posted. And there's two separate functions there. I've listed both functions, but that's done in sales invoices and BP customer invoices. So you want to make sure those are all posted. You want to make sure that all your purchase invoices and credit memos are posted. And again, that's two separate processes. You got your purchase invoices and your BP supplier invoices. There's also some inquiries in the system that will show you unposted invoices or unposted shipments. You can find them under Reports View Queries, and if you do a search for the word not, you'll see that there's a bunch of queries there that you can use to help you identify which ones still need to be posted, if there's some stray ones out there. Or you can just run the batch process to post everything at once and make sure you've got everything for the year. You can also use the advanced selection tasks to filter those screens for unposted invoices. So if you use your advanced selection, you can identify the ones that are unposted. So you want to make sure all your payments are posted and any deposits you have in the system. So you'll have both payments, and then if you generate those payments into a single deposit, you'll need to make sure that those are posted to the bank also. If you're performing a physical inventory, you'll want to make sure that's done and all the count sessions are closed out so that the journal entries are waiting in Stojo to be posted once you run the interfaces. You want to make sure all your subcontracting or all your subcontracted orders are closed and the costs are calculated so that those will post with the interface running too. So there's two, the stock accounting interface, a lot of clients have that running with recurring tasks. If you're running that as a recurring task, it may be erroring out due to, like, rounding issues are very common. So you'll want to run the stock accounting interface manually and just make sure there's no errors there so that you can make sure that everything is posted. Same thing with the WIP accounting interface. Just make sure that you run it manually and clean up any errors that might generate. All right, so continuing down the checklist, then we get into our perform financial accounting processes. So you want to enter your manual accrual entries that you normally put in and you want to check the box to reverse them. You can either reverse them one at a time, or you can use the X3 function to reverse them all together at once. The system allows you to set up recurring entries. So if you've got recurring entries in the system, you can run the process to generate all your recurring entries. If you're not using FAS, you'll enter your depreciation entry manually, or that may be a recurring entry. We'll talk a little bit more about FAS on the next slide if you're actually running FAS. If you have multiple companies in the system with intercompany balances, you're going to want to tie all those out beforehand and make sure that you do to and do froms for each company match the other company. You'll want to run the invoices to receive process in financials so that any non-managed stock that's received from a purchase order, it posts to the expense account into the receive not invoice account. Because if you remember, non-inventory items do not make a journal entry upon receipt. You need to run the invoices to receive process to actually get that journal entry to kick out. You'll want to go through manual matching or automatic matching for your receive not invoiced account. Match all the receipts with the invoices. And then once that's done, you can dump that screen to Excel, and that becomes your support for that account. You'll want to generate your multi-currency revaluation entries for any invoices out there that are in a different currency. And you can consider dimensional allocations. If any of the dimensions need to be fixed on a journal entry, you want to make sure you get that done before year end. There is a parameter in X3 that will allow you to, if you change the parameter, you can actually go in and change the dimensional allocations on a journal entry after year end, after everything's been closed and finalized. So if you do need to make changes to dimensional values after year end, you don't have to reopen the year, you just have to change the parameter. There's no audit trail on that though, so be careful. If you've created any simulated journal entries in the system, you'll either need to delete those or change their status to actual entries so that you can finalize those entries and close the period. So any questions on this slide?
When you were talking about the R&I,
yes.
On the non-inventory items, we know that those do not post to the GL.
Yes.
You said there's a step you do. We do a manual accrual now. Is there an easier way to do this? So if we have non-inventory items that have been received, what is the process that you just talked about that allows them to post?
So invoices to receive, let me just guide this over. So I'm looking at version 9. So if you go to financials, closing. So it's invoices to receive. What's credits to receive? This one right here. They call it credits to receive in version 9, I guess. It's invoices to
credits to receive.
Yeah. So they changed the name in version 11. So on the right-hand side of the screen, once it comes up, it's a little slow. Products not managed. So what this will do is you can use this process to just generate the entry for products not managed. Because this will do anything that's been received that hasn't been invoiced, it'll generate an entry for. But you want to just be careful that you select products not managed, because if you select all products, then you'll get double postings.
Okay, so hold on a second. So it's on, you would do all sites, your company, and then just under generation, hit products not managed.
Yeah. So you might go through 12, 31, 17.
And that will post all of those items that are non-inventory, correct?
Yes.
And they will post to the GL. And then what happens when they want to enter the invoice later, they just go ahead and enter it to the R&I account?
Yeah, I think you'll get a reversal too with this entry. You'll put reverse on the first day of the next month. If you don't get it, then you'll just have to make it. But just run it in you can run it in simulation mode first and see what you get. And then if you're happy with that, then run it in actual mode. When you do a simulation entry, it will not post a reversal for it. When you do the actual, it will post a reversal.
Because you click down there. So we
Yeah.
can automatically do these every month if we wanted to for our month-end accruals.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so it gives you a reversal date down here if you need to change it. But you want to select products not managed. But I suggest just run it in active simulation mode first, because if you've never run it before, you might, you can always delete you can always delete the simulated entry. So for those of you that have fixed assets, you want to make sure that all the fixed assets periods are set to actual in the depreciation context screen, because by default they're set to simulated, which means you just get the simulated entries, which would have to be changed to actual anyway. So you want to make sure all the periods are set to actual, and then confirm all the journal entries are posted for the year. Because you can generate the depreciation, but you also need to run the posting process to the GL. So just confirm all the entries are posted. You might also want to take a look at the context monitor to determine if anything needs to be corrected. If the context monitor isn't green, it'd be red, and if it's red, then it'll list the errors that need to be fixed before you can close out fixed assets. A lot of times, if it's red, it's just if you disposed of an asset during the year, you need to make sure that you've posted those entries too. So once you've cleared the errors and posted all the depreciation in actual mode, for some reason FAS allows you to post simulated entries to the general ledger and then close the period without actually posting the actual entry. Just make sure they're actual entries. If not, you'll have to go back and change it.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to go back a second on the closing processing that we were just talking about. I went and looked it up real quick, the plan. On the credits to receive, that's for credit memos. The invoice receivables is for invoices. I wanted to check that real quick. So, okay.
All right.
All right. Keep going.
We want to do invoices to receive, right? Not credits.
Yeah, I have it listed as invoice. I just don't know if I saw that in version 10. I mean, no.
They rename, sometimes they rename the functions in different
So let's do
versions,
this one.
but it's the FUNPTH.
Oh,
And
all
then
right, so it's this one. Sorry, it's this one. It's the same screen once you get in there.
Yes.
All right. They just call it different tasks by version. And our version 11 isn't fast enough for this person. What needs to be corrected. All right, so after you've cleared all the errors, then you can actually perform the year-end close in fixed assets. Just keep in mind that periods cannot be reopened in fixed assets. Once they're closed, they're closed. And you've got to close those periods before you can close the GL. So reconcile bank accounts. You want to make sure your bank recs are done before year end, just so that you can tie cash out. And there's no automatic reconciliation yet. There's a enhancement request out to Sage to get that going someday. So any questions on the fixed assets? Close? No? All right. So continuing down the list, we get to the point where you may have some modules that are ready for closing before you can actually close the general ledger. And to prevent people from posting to those modules, you can do a couple things here. You can either restrict postings by module by changing the parameter values under general parameters, or you can restrict postings of the document types or journal codes using a date range. So I took a screenshot of the parameter values. So this is under setup, general parameters, and then it's the common data chapter and the closing operations group. And you can see there's a date range here. So if you've got all your purchase invoices entered for 2017 and you don't want anyone to enter any more purchase invoices, you can put a start date here of 1/1/18 and a end date of 12/31/18, and that'll prevent anybody from entering any new purchase invoices. And then right down the list here, you can go to, if you fill in the next date range, that'll prevent people from entering journal entries. The next one is customer BP invoices, supplier BP invoices, entry of payments, etc. And then the last one at the bottom here, vend date, is for sales invoices. You can also do the restrictions by document type, and those are that's under setup, financial document types, and the journal code, actually document types might be on the common data. And then you can also do it by journal codes, and it allows you to put date ranges on the document types and journal codes to prevent people from using those document types and journal code. So if you're not ready to actually close the final period of the year, but you want to prevent people from posting, this is what you do to certain areas. Any questions? No. So the managerial reports that are in the system that people usually tie out before they close the month. Normally you run your customer aging report and tie that out to the general ledger balance. Same thing with supplier aging, tie that to the trial balance. I've got the report names here, NA, or the report codes actually, NA-BPATB, and the trial balance. You'll want to print out your matching detail for the received not invoiced account, as we talked about already. There is a requester, it's ACH 040, and that works for some of our clients. It can be used with certain limitations.
Yeah.
If you're receiving in full but then doing partial invoicing on those receiver lines, you're not going to match exactly on that requester. But if you're receiving in full and invoicing in full, you might be all right to use that ACH 040 report. So you can find that under reports, view queries, and if you type in ACH 040, it'll pop up. If it's not in your folder, you might just need to copy it down from the X3 folder. There's a fixed asset listing report in the system. I think it might not have total accumulated depreciation, but I've got a query, if anybody needs, that pulls your fixed asset totals, your accumulated totals, and your net book value totals so that you can tie out the balances in that listing to the report, to the trial balance. You got your stock valuation report that you should run on 12/31. Some clients set that up as a recurring task so that it can be run at midnight on 12/31 so that it matches the trial balance at 12/31 or it's close. Or... And then as far as WIP goes, if I did your implementation, you should have a ZWIP requester out there that will tie your WIP out by work order number so that if there's any balance remaining in the WIP at 12/31, you can see which work orders are responsible for that WIP and if you need to do any further work on the WIP account before you close the period.
Can you show us that report? That WIP report? We're having a hard time finding WIP reports. I'm sorry if I'm...
I don't have that report handy. I have it on client sites. We can work with you to get it on your system, and
Yeah.
it will allow you to tie it out by work order number. Because
Right
yes,
now, we were running a WIP val report, and that doesn't tie, and so somebody helped create a report, but it comes straight from the GL, but it does identify the work orders, but it really isn't an inventory report. So we can use it, I guess, but it's not really something like an inventory report. So yeah, we would, if we need to call, that would be helpful for us to have the correct report.
Yeah, well, this is based on the general ledger so that you can identify work orders that are sitting in the WIP balance so that there's any issues. I mean, that might be the one. I'm sorry, who am I talking to?
I'm sorry, this is Michelle at CoreLink.
Oh, all right, maybe I didn't do that report for you. But mine is based on the general ledger, too, and it really just, it looks at the general ledger, and by work order number, it gives you the balance that's sitting in there so that if there's any problems, you can kind of drill down on the work orders.
I do have that report. Somebody created that for me. That's what it is. It's not really an inventory report then, right? It's more of a GL.
It's not an inventory report, no. It's more of a reconciliation report. But, yeah, the one that's in the system, I've had issues with.
Yeah,
the one
we
that
can't.
Sage had.
Yeah.
So we kind of, at my clients, we've worked to try to handle it on a work order by work order basis, just to make sure, because they all should go to zero eventually. So.
Okay.
Any other questions on the reports? All right, so once you've got all your operational type transactions posted and all your financial tasks complete, then you can actually start closing out the period and year. So you want to run final validation on all remaining temporary entries, I should say temporary instead of unposted. So if the general ledger still has temporary entries in there, you need to make those final. You can also run the CLOPPER report, the pre-closing report, so that you can see if there's any errors out there that are going to prevent you from closing the period. And you can do that every month too. So at that point, if you've got no errors and all your temporary entries are final, you can then close the period. Just make sure that the stock period is also closed. And when you close out period 12 of any year, it'll also tell you that it's the final month of the year. So you got to make sure that January 2018 is open. Normally it will be because usually you close after people start posting to 2018. So you'll probably want to make sure that January 2018 is open before year end so that when you come in on January 2nd, things are good to go. So closing out the year, once you're ready to actually close the year, it's a different task in X3. I want to go to financials, closing, and then fiscal year close. You got to make sure all users are logged out of X3. You can turn off the accounting tasks. The new PR is the journal and document type used to create the closing entries. It's usually there now, but there were times where you have to actually manually create that in your first year of closing if you didn't import any GL history. And you might want to confirm the miscellaneous accounts on the chart of accounts. Just to make sure that you're going to post to the right retained earnings account. and just to make sure you don't get any errors when you're trying to close out the year, because there's other lines on the miscellaneous tab on the chart of accounts that aren't necessarily used in the journal entries that are being created to close out the year, but you may get an error and prevent the year from closing. So if you get an error saying you need an account, just go to the chart of accounts and fill in that tab. So closing the year, so this is under financials, closing process, fiscal year end. You'll want to put in your company. Normally just close one company and one ledger at a time. This seminar is not really about closing more than one ledger. I'm assuming that everybody just has one ledger. So you got one,
Not yet. I
you want
haven't
to
done
set
yet.
all ledgers to no, and you'll close your legal ledger.
No, it hasn't
It'll
sent me
default to
anything.
the new fiscal year, and then your document types and journal codes are just new PR. Those should default right in. You can run it in simulation mode if you want to see the entry that's going to be created first. Otherwise, you can just close out the year. So the journal entries get created that, or the journal entries that are created are the ones to close out the P&L to retained earnings, and they'll also create another entry to establish opening balance on the balance sheet at 1/1/2018. If you're not ready to close yet, you can use year-end simulation under financials utilities, and you'll see year-end simulation. And if you do run that, you'll want to run it for 2018, not for 2017. You're always simulating a year beginning is how I look at it. So if you do that, no entry results, but you're rolling the balances forward so that you can run your trial balance and have numbers that make sense, at least in the balance sheet. If you close too early and you need to reopen, you can always reopen a fiscal year. My advice would be just don't make the new period entry on 1/1/18 final until you close out 2017. Otherwise, you'll have to go into the database and change that from final to temporary if you do make it final. So years can be reopened once you close a year. I guess, yeah. Just be careful with the new period entry on 1/1/18 if you need to reopen 2017. So any questions on closing the year?
And just a quick one on the 1/1/18, the new fiscal year, that's where you would put 1/1/18, right? Under that,
Yeah, sorry, yeah,
that
yeah.
said 1/17. Okay, that
Yeah,
was just,
yeah.
all right.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, yeah. Well, this might be from last year. All right, so financial reporting considerations. You want to verify using SEI or FDE or even running the trial balance that all your period balances for 1/1/18 are correct. I've seen in the past where I have closed out a year and the balances don't roll forward correctly and you need to reopen the year and then reclose it to fix the issue. But so you want to run your financial reports, just make sure everything looks good. And I think probably most of you are using SEI. FDE works just as works well for some reports too. SEI is a lot more user friendly though. So some other considerations on when you're closing out the year for budgeting. You can set up new budget codes for 2018, or you can just import 2018 balances to the existing budget codes that exist, or you can just set up a new version for 2018. It all works. Most people import the balances, and if you just use the same budget codes, you won't have to change any of the reports because they'll still look to the that budget code in SEI or in Financial Data Extractor. If you're using operational budgets, you'll need to carry over the carryover budgets need to be calculated and carried over to 2018. I don't think we have too many people using operational budgets. One question that usually comes up though is updating standard costs. I've kind of just outlined the process that I use at clients when they ask for help, and typically this is something that's done in January because nobody ever has any time to do it in December. So the system will continue using the old standard cost. If you're on a standard costing method or evaluation method, you don't have time to update standard cost in 2017, it will continue using the 2018 cost and until you actually create the, I'm sorry, it will continue using 2017 cost until 2018 once I create. So just kind of an outline of the process that I use to update standard costs is we copy the current raw material costs to simulated costs. So that'll create a new simulated cost in 2018 for raw materials. We then either manually update those simulated costs or we export the data out to Excel and update all the simulated raw material costs in Excel and then import it back into X3. At that point, you can perform a 2018 BOM cost roll-up on the finished goods using the simulated costs. And then you can review all those simulated costs, make sure they're good, maybe even do some testing. You can do all this in a test folder also. And then once those costs are good, you can then use a process to copy the 2018 simulated cost to 2018 standard cost. That's kind of just an outline of updating standard costs that we've used in the past. Any question on this slide? 1099s, they're found under declarations in X3. If you're ready to actually do the processing and your vendors are set up correctly to track 1099 payments and what box you're going to actually show the payment in, then it'll calculate an amount for those suppliers. So that's when you run the calculate 1099 payments. If you need to edit the payments, you can go into the 1099 payment summary, which is this little screenshot below here, and then on the action button for each line within the payment summary, you can then edit the payment amount. So if you click on the action button, you'll see a task to edit 1099 payment amounts. If everything's good, you can print the 1099 and 1096 forms. You'll need to purchase those forms.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. The system doesn't print them.
It'll print them, but it's just to white paper. I mean, you'll need to actually buy the forms and print on the forms.
Is there a specific form we should buy, or is there, or just the ones you just get at Office Depot?
I think Office Depot should work. I know we've had clients just buy them.
Okay.
Staples, Office Depot.
Okay.
Because it's a crystal report, so if the alignment's off a little bit, you can print the test page and just make sure everything lines up. And if everything's good, then you can just print the rest of them. Because if not, you can just edit the crystal report and move things around. We usually come out with an update at the end of the year to fix the crystal where appropriate. And electronic filing is not supported yet, so if you've got over, I forget what it is, you'll need to file those electronically with third party. Any questions on 1099s? All right, so the last piece here is changing your default date parameters. These are the dates that default in when you go to run a report or view a query. these default in based upon the setup in the general parameters under supervisor and group default values, and you've got your default start date and default end date. You might want to change those. If you've got your line 6 down here, end date set to 12/31/17, you'll want to put that out at least another year so that people don't get errors when they log into the system. So I got these set to 2017, but you just want to update those to 2018. So this is generally for everybody. You can also go into each user if you want these dates to be different. If you're still doing a lot in 2017 and you're not ready to change it back, then you can override them at the user level. And that's all. So if there's any questions on anything, or you can...
Going back on the 1099s, so
Yep.
if you print your forms using X3, but you have to file electronically, is there some kind of file upload that we can send to the IRS, or do we have to buy some additional software that we have to upload the information to?
I would think we could build a file. It's probably just a text file. We could build, just write a query to build what the IRS needs from us, from X3. There's no export, no. There's nothing that's going to, but we could probably build it. It sounds like they just need a query, but I've never actually seen what gets uploaded to the IRS. But normally, if it's the case, it's usually handled by a third party, is what I've seen. But if you want us to take a look, we can take a look. Just need to understand what the IRS filing requirements are.
That will conclude our call. Thank you.